commercialization because they're tired of the 5%. And it's pretty interesting as it goes along. Brett, you want to add anything to that?
I don't even know where to begin. So maybe now, as you say, now do we pivot? Like, let's put it in a context.
Let's apply to yours. If you had the SUV, how would you do it?
Your choice. You can tell it from a lens of underpants gnomes or the SUV.
Whatever, or your own.
No pressure.
So, plans notwithstanding, the first thing I have to say is just how thrilling it is, the rigor and discipline that you have created for this repeatable process and methodology. To me, it evokes the Manhattan Project and the origins of Skunk Works and the reasons why innovation had to be walled off from large bureaucratic institutions in order to function. You have created that discipline in this repeatable process. I find it incredibly compelling and exciting. From the SUV perspective and the underwear gnomes perspective, both combined, I first want to say that in many experiences that I've had professionally involving commercialization of IoT, digital therapeutics, digital diagnostics, there are a series of ecosystem level challenges that individual organizations, often early stage companies, under-resourced, capital constrained, believe they have a mental model that in order for them to be commercially successful, they have to solve what is actually a systemic, industry-wide structural problem. And I developed a fascination with complex adaptive systems and systemic interventions and the innovator's dilemma and related themes early in my career. And throughout my experience with commercialization, I have ultimately widened the aperture through each venture, getting to structural and systemic interventions. I think that the industry as a whole has a blind spot and a little bit of magical thinking that goes on that is best reflected in the question mark between profit and underwear. And by creating new business models that can create reusable industry-wide revenue models and validation models, technical, and in my case I focus on healthcare very much, clinical validation. We can provide an industry utility that has a great opportunity to benefit the whole ecosystem. Inside the SUV, the individual silos involved with making one organization commercially successful. Imagine there's thousands and thousands of those SUVs because you're growing very rapidly, I have no doubt, and there are major unmet needs that you're fulfilling. Those thousands of now brilliant, incredibly excellent, execution with excellence organizations need new roads to drive on. They need new traffic signals. They need new safety systems. They need new regs. And that's where our work in my organization comes in the ability to create new systems and structures that can benefit the industry as a whole. We're starting our work, so we're an early organization. Along with several other co-founders, I started it in March of 24, just last year. We are beginning this new ecosystem structure with something called the National Hero Initiative. That is health enhancing resource orchestration, and it's about matching resources to need from many sectors: philanthropic, public social safety net, private organization, commercial sector, to a specific cohort with well understood unmet needs, and that is active duty military service members, United States veterans, first responders, and all of their families. And this is the way that we are activating this ecosystem. And if you imagine all of these individuals becoming trusted endpoints, and each individual has the ability to have a completely secure and verifiable device and device registry, trusted data transport established, every hop between local compute all the way up to cloud, traceable, including through every transformation, with many novel encryption modalities. We have a very intense security focus. The economics of this facilitate the ability for every organization in IoT that has a thesis that it will monetize the data it is creating, either through direct data procurements or through indirect tech-enabled services. We are enabling a new economic structure that facilitates what we think will be the full financialization of data as an asset class that can underpin an ethical and inclusive economy that actually brings individual people into the value chain of data and AI. So I'll pause there, but thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We were talking earlier about wisdom. Can you go into some detail on that as well?
Yes, you may have noticed that I have a deep love of phonetically pronounceable acronyms. It's like a compulsion. It's a little bit of an OCD thing. So wisdom is the worldwide informatics system and data ontology matrix. If you are to create a new economic structure for the on-market price, with price discovery, with fair transactions, you must be able to have commerce at a much more rapid scale with respect to that data than you can have today. Like for example, Jerry, if you wanted to monetize ethically and in a compliant way a specific data asset at Cleveland Clinic, what would be involved in that is an endless number of phone calls and meetings and emails and discussions and, many lawyers and the compliance office and so on. And every time you might want to do that, that's a bespoke transaction. And there is no open price discovery, and the general world has no way to discover the assets that you have, or in an automated fashion, initiate transactions that can also benefit granularly consenting data subjects. So the wisdom system, worldwide informatics system and data ontology matrix, is a public good infrastructure that is part of the market architecture for financializing data as an asset class and unlocking its vast potential for clinical, scientific, and economic growth. As you see on the slide, it is no longer necessary to centralize data in order to derive value from it. And in fact, doing so actually adds to your provenance tracing problems, your security problems, your compliance problems. So the basic principle of bringing the compute to the data instead of data to the compute, and that includes many new edge local processing, storage and processing opportunities that were not available recently. In the center of that, though, you have to have a mechanic that basically has a publish and subscribe of a knowledge graph, continuously expanding, that allows every time a new data domain is added into the ecosystem, it now becomes discoverable, but the underlying data is not exposed in any way. It's 100% privacy preserving, and only metadata is exposed. So this will be used first in the National Hero Initiative. So imagine a veteran who was exposed to burn pits in Iraq and has just received a new cancer diagnosis and is going through PACT Act-related claims processing and so on. And imagine an ecosystem of big pharma's research sponsors that are needing to achieve many different things regarding, let's say, precision oncolytics for populations just like that. The economic flow here can flow all the way from the buy side of a new data economy, being able to acquire superior assets, very highly secure, all the way to that veteran who is now can be screened and compensated for market research on their personal data. And the value chain involves providers, individuals, payers, public, private, employers. But most importantly, the individual people are winners in this. We can't keep going talking about ethical AI when the underlying data economy, for example, in 2023 alone, $66.5 billion in trade in health data alone. 0% of that accrued to any of the data subjects.
Wow.
There's no ethical AI over that kind of fundamental structure. So we're seeking to change that and do that for those who served and serve us today as our first priority.
Thank you. Well, who wants to add on?
Well, so I want to pick up on a couple things you said, Heather, because you've talked about both having a platform for monetization, right? Basically for deriving economic value, right? And that's, effectively the P side of the P&L, right? And you also alluded to something which I love. You started to talk about, hey, are we entering an era that's more around bringing the compute to the data as opposed to just centralizing all of the data and incurring all of the risks that come along with that. And if you think about that, that's actually that has a very direct impact on what we'll call it the L side of the P&L, right? Because it starts to have very significant implications for infrastructure costs, data movement costs, hosting costs, data storage costs, all of these different vectors. And being able to articulate that and understand the impact of those is extremely critical for figuring out how to successfully make money and deliver value in this space. And I think that it's very easy to overlook it, right, and kind of make these big picture assumptions around, okay, I've been in IT for a long time, right? I used to do mainframe stuff, right? It's like, there was, for a while everything was mainframe, everything was centralized, right? Then, the world of client server came and everything went out 1,000 different ways, right? I feel old when I say this, right? And then, everything went to the cloud, right? Everything got re-centralized, right? And now we're entering this era of edge, and effectively the price of edge compute continues to come down, and the energy requirements for it continue to come down. The heat generated continues to come down. Like all these different factors continue to come down in a very positive way. All of a sudden, it's like, oh well, this centralization we just did in the cloud, maybe we didn't do that. Maybe it's time to start to think about putting it out. Putting the compute, putting the intelligence where the data is, and that actually has a very pleasant side benefit of you can grow into it as you need to grow into it. You don't need some big massive database in the sky. So I love this idea of taking the compute to where the data is, because it has very significant impacts on the cost structure and the profitability when you look at these connected devices and ecosystems.
And we work on a lot of business models like you just talked about. We want to talk a little bit about the facility. Do we have a slide on the facility? There.
This is fun because we didn't rehearse this, so we just have some slides, and it's like they'll come up periodically, and it's cool. To the point, right, of you need to bring all the disciplines together under one roof. This reflects the space where John and I work with a lot of our clients on a weekly basis, right? And that's everything from consumer clients, health clients, industrial clients, government clients, kind of across the board. And it was important for us to be very, very deliberate of what are all the skills and all the capabilities you need under one roof to both build world-class devices, right? So create the physical product that's connected securely, right? But then also build the digital infrastructure in a way that's scalable, right? And is designed with purpose in mind, right? So not just, oh, here's a generic cloud IoT platform, we're gonna throw that at everything. It's like sometimes you need something, fit for purpose, a little more specialized, tailored for use, right? So the ability to bring both sides together in one place has been really key. And it's always we figured this out, but not all the companies we've worked with have figured it out yet. Sort of the how do you bridge the gap of the R&D engineers with the software engineers? Because in a lot of companies, like you think about the idea of silos, you've got your hardware engineers over here, often R&D function, they're working on schematics, they're doing sourcing, they're building prototypes down in the shop. They've got a certain language they use. They've got a certain budget cycle they use, a certain project management methodology or framework of choice that they use. Then over here, you've got the IT people, right? And the IT folks over here, right, they're building the apps, they're building the platforms, they've got their own language, their own lingo, their own processes. Maybe they're doing Agile, maybe they're not. Who knows what they're doing, right? Their own funding mechanisms. And it's really interesting to see organizations that are trying to get into this physical digital hybrid space and successfully get products out the door to market. The learning curve of trying to get the physical product development gears to mesh up with the digital product development gears in a very, very productive way, right? Because it requires having a common language. It requires aligning on what, if not an entirely common process, finding the intersection points between the two. It requires having common funding mechanisms, right? You can't fund the physical development team and not fund the digital development team if you're building a connected product, right? So these are the kinds of considerations that, it's like I lived through this at P&G. I bang my head against the desk like mobile, every single day, right? Like trying to get the R&D and the IT folks in the same room, all on the same page, all on the same budget, all on the same process, right? It happens. It's a tough reality of the world. So, but it's fixable, it's solvable, it's addressable.
When we put this building together about 20 years ago, we were aware of this whole 5% business and this fractured, siloed idea. So I groused around to see, is anybody in the country, in the world, doing something where it's vertically integrated so that all the functions are in one place? And I found it at the Steve Jobs building at Pixar in San Francisco. And I went out there and I studied it before I did the building. And there's a book called Creativity, Inc. by Ed Catmull, who was Steve Jobs' partner putting this thing together. And what they talk about is they have this building where everybody's in the same building. They have a atrium in the center where the bathrooms are on one side, the cafeteria is on the other side. It's stacked floors, 5 floors all around the atrium. So everybody sort of bumps into each other during the day. They have formal meetings and informal meetings, but in Pixar, they have the animators, they have the voiceover, they have the writers, they have the script, the producers. Everybody's in the building. And at the time, 20 years ago, they were 95%. I said, I want a piece of that. So when I found this historic church up in University Circle, guess what? It had an atrium, it has a rotunda in the center, bigger than the US Capitol. It has 5 floors stacked around. We could put everybody together. We moved in, and it's worked out to 95%. I've never told you this story, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a university, and they wanted to do an innovation center. They heard about our innovation center, and they said, we want to benchmark something. I said, hey, go out to Pixar Studios, because they are really, you should look at ours first, but go out there and look at it. Well, they did, and they came back and they recorded it. They said, well, guess what? When Disney acquired Pixar, they wanted to expand. So they built silos all around Pixar. And guess what? It went back to 5%. Interesting. So they didn't learn the lesson.
I would love to add something to this about the silo busting and bring it back to the underwear norms, of course. So there's another layer of bigger silos above the silo that's resolved in each one of the SUVs, wherein the underwear are being stashed in the back behind the. But the right there, exactly. So the additional level of silo is where each organization commercializing presumes that they've got effectively a one-to-one economic buyer. And as opposed to a model where potentially an economic buyer is only one of a cluster, a coalition, a public-private partnership. et cetera, where the financing of the solution can be load balanced much more effectively, and risk sharing across many stakeholder groups can be implemented. And there's an inversion of that as well, which is, I tend to think a lot about the problems of the buy side, the blockers of the buy side, the objections to your sales, and the objection handling. Speaking in a healthcare context, if you are a large provider board, every time you want to adopt a new innovation that uses IoT, especially with embedded AI systems, et cetera, there is a comprehensive and completely replicated process dealing with identity, security, compliance, bioethics, clinical validation, if appropriate, and contracting and reimbursement. It's not as if there are standards for those things at this point. It's the Wild West. That means every organization commercializing is going through that process within their cost of sales. That is a high cost of sales. The buy side would much prefer not to do that. They would much prefer to think about it in their business, which is providing excellent care that is delivered in episodes, that is bundled in contracting, and that increasingly has to bear risk. If you imagine a patient-centered perspective, the reality of let's say, an optimally digitally empowered patient is not a single IoT device. It's not a single app. In fact, app fatigue is a major blocker and problem. An individual person may have dozens, or even more in my case, of connected devices in their home. They have a smart automobile. They have tracking in the surveillance state and the surveillance economy going on, in data sharded everywhere about them. In this paradigm, what really needs to happen is that we need to incorporate those innovations into the cost basis of value-based contracting, so that they can be procured holistically, where not one solution, not one device, but a completely person-centered and holistic experience for the patient can have a single price tag, and a price tag that bears risk with the various payers, public sector, private sector, employers. So breaking that silo the other direction, I think is really strategically significant, where the go-to-markets can be made complementary and bundled and connected to episodes of acute care, chronic disease management programs, pop-up programs, et cetera.
I love the discussion of the mega silos, because this reflects a very real challenge, and one of the hypotheses I occasionally share with some of our clients is, look, if you're doing core innovation, right? So you've got your existing product portfolio, you're adding things that are, fundamentally similar to that portfolio, or doing line extensions, incremental improvements. You can probably do that on your own, right? You don't need a lot of help, right? If you're trying to do something adjacent, get into a side industry, or do something that's truly disruptive, take an industry and fundamentally try to turn the model on its head, the chances of you being able to go it alone are much slimmer, right? You need this set of ecosystem partners, and you need to think much more broadly around who is in the SUV, and practically speaking, like this SUV ain't gonna cut it, right? You're probably gonna need a chain of SUVs all tied together. And an example that comes to mind for me, we've been working with a company that's working on connected HVAC equipment, right? So heaters, air conditioners, and the like. And this seems super simplistic, right? Because if I'm like, okay, let's talk about HVAC and who the customer is, right? Seems like a simple question, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's the homeowner, right? Because, well, the air conditioner gets installed in their home, right? But also the installer is a customer, right? The retailer is a customer. The home builder might be a customer, right? There's a lot of different players in that ecosystem. There's a lot of value, right, that can be generated if you collect the right data in the right way, share the right data in the right way. You can generate a lot of value for multiple players in that ecosystem, right? So practical example, right, from the homeowner, I might get, alerts that's like, hey, it's time to change your air filter, right? Because the efficiency of your system is getting bogged down. If you run it with a clogged air filter, it's going to damage the system, right? Super simple, right? I care about energy efficiency. I care about not blowing up my, air conditioner unit, right? I'm like, okay, that's cool, right? What's in it for the installer, right? Maybe what's in it for the installer is they'll get future alerts if the HVAC system starts to fail, right? It's like if predictive maintenance indicates, hey, maybe something's going to go wrong with this. Maybe the installer or the retailer gets an alert and say, hey, here's an opportunity to get ahead of a new sale, right? Make a call, go out, proactively replace the unit before it fails, right? And there's other players in the ecosystem as well, right? And it's the ability to think more broadly than just I have a single customer that I'm trying to generate value for, or rather, who are all the customers in that ecosystem and what value can I generate for all of them through the connectivity and the data that's generated?
And there's another part of that, is that the HVAC company that's installing this HVAC system in your home, 90% of it is all the stuff that the customer, the retail customer, the homeowner doesn't see. They see the thermostat. And the thermostat was delivered by another company called Nest. So Nest is getting all the data. They're getting all that interaction with the customer. And this big HVAC system, which you've all heard of, put all this stuff in. They're not getting any credit. They're not getting any data. They're not getting any information. And so what we did, so another customer is the HVAC company itself. What we did is develop a smart thermostat system that goes with the entire 90% of the system, works very, very well, cost effective, as good or better than the Nest, and everything connects. So that's vertical innovation. And that's something that's actually getting done. It's going to affect everybody.
Could I riff on that for a second? Sure. So now we've got your super successful inside the 95% IoT-enabled HVAC manufacturing company, and it's got distribution, and it's got sales, and it is rolling, and it's growing. Now, next step comes along that I would propose. Now you have public health research sponsors who like the work that's being done in, no doubt in Cleveland, in the smartest water in the world, in air filtration and particle detection. Let's say you have a research sponsor who wants to learn about how you could detect COVID particles or other black mold or a variety of environmental health risks that could exist in a home. Now that becomes possible and economically viable through a deal with your HVAC company, where there is another set of paperwork and a bolt-on sensor, and it rides through the distribution channels. It's an upsell on the commercialization approach, and all of a sudden, this data set that is being created can expand massively, including its monetization potential, which the HVAC company would be getting a cut of.
Yeah, and it's exactly what Scott was talking about when he did his base model of his connected bike. All of a sudden, he added features as it went along. Once you have that IoT connected platform, and by the way, it gets back to the minimum viable product. You really want to commercialize whatever you can as fast as you can, minimally, but really good, right? It's not perfect. Remember, perfection can be the enemy of good. You want to be a good enough product to get it out there. Then you can add to it, just like Heather's talking about, in our HVAC, and you can do it with hospital systems. You can do it with almost anything. Once you have that platform of IoT connectivity, now all of a sudden, it's incredible what you can do.
So riffing one more time, and then I promise I'll stop.
Are we taking?
I think, oh no, I'm just, Mike, are we doing okay on time?
How are we doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're okay?
Keep going.
So now imagine this person-centered computing paradigm, and the person as a trusted edge endpoint and trusted device registry now includes this HVAC data feed around that human. It's connected through their personal hub. Think about the appreciation of the economic value, the financial valuation of data as an asset class, the more discrete it is and the less diverse it is, that is the least expensive data. It goes up in value the more data domains that you can use for cross-sectional analysis around a single data subject.